Shabbat Shalom. For the next several weeks, we are blessed to have many B'nai Mitzvah, during which our learning will be guided by the questions of our children on the Parshat HaShavua, on the Torah portion of the week. So I want to take advantage of this weekend to make a few observations about the book of Deuteronomy that we are reading and to reflect on this current moment in Jewish history. The rabbis called Deuteronomy Mishneh Torah, which can be translated as a repetition of what has come before in the Torah. But commentators long ago noticed that Moses is not merely repeating what happened in the past. He is telling his own version of events to the Jewish people. A few weeks ago on Parshat Devarim, the first Torah portion of Deuteronomy that's always read right before Tisha B'Av, Moses recounts the sin of the spies, but listen to how he tells it. He says, "Then all of you came to me and said, 'Let us send spies ahead to spy out the land and bring back word.' And I approved of the plan. And so I selected from you 12 participants, one representative from each tribe." What's the problem? That's not really how it happened. The name of the Torah portion in which the sin of the spies occurs is Shlach Lecha, which means, and it begins, God spoke to Moses and said, "Send for yourselves." It was God's idea and Moses who followed through on it. But when he is retelling the story in the book of Deuteronomy, he is blaming the people. He basically says, "You came to me and I approved." One can read this cynically and say that Moshe is just rewriting history to blame the people instead of himself because, you get to do that when you're the one in charge. And there is something very rabbinic in Moses's reading. The Haftarah this morning was the second of 7 Haftarot of Nechama, of consolation, that move us from Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah. Tisha B'Av, that occurs right after that reading in the Torah, commemorates not just the destruction of the temples as buildings. The temples symbolized God's presence in our midst, God's presence in the world. The rabbis didn't blame the Romans for the destruction of the temples, even though most historians will tell you, the reason why the temple was destroyed is because that's what the Romans did. They wandered through the Middle East and they destroyed the temples of whoever it was that they decided to destroy the temples. No, the rabbis, when they look back on this moment in history, knowing the history full well, they told the Jewish people that when bad things happen to the Jewish people, we should turn inward. We should take responsibility and ask, what has been my role? What's been my role in driving God's presence from our midst? What has been my role? What has been our role in mucking up the world? But there is something else happening in Deuteronomy. In our Parsha, Moses continues his retelling of history as he is warning the people against the dangers of arrogance and self-satisfaction. And in chapter 8, verse 15, he says, "Lest your heart will become arrogant and you will forget Adonai, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt and led you through the great and awesome wilderness." And now listen to how Moses describes this. He's talking about God who took you out of Egypt, led you through the great and awesome wilderness, who brought forth water for you from the rock of flint. Now, the story of water, of bringing forth water, appears 3 times. The other 2 in the Torah, in the book of Exodus and in the book of Numbers, in those stories, it's Moses who hits the rock. Moses who brings forth water, not God. And so in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is not just blaming the people, he's also decentering himself. He's taking a step back in a similar way to how the rabbis will later take Moses out of the Haggadah. Moses, in subtle ways, as he's speaking to the people, is taking himself out of the narrative, and in doing so, he is saying to the people, it is now time for you to step forward. Many of you know I'm with my chavruta, I'm studying Abarbanel, Don Isaac Abarbanel's commentary on the Torah, and Abarbanel noticed a problem in the book of Deuteronomy, which is Moses seems to be the narrator, and the book of Deuteronomy seems to claim that Moses is writing the words that we are reading. And like other commentators, he says, well, wait a minute, how can the book of Deuteronomy, which seems to be written by an individual, by a human being, be part of a divine Torah? And his answer is that the book of Deuteronomy was written by Moses, that these speeches are really the words that Moses said to the people, and then Moses wrote them down, and then God came afterward and gave a divine stamp of approval and said, you have spoken well, and I am putting your human words into my divine Torah, and they are the same as Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. They came from you, but they are divine nevertheless. Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote in his book, God in Search of Man, the Pentateuch consists of 5 books. The Shulchan Aruch, which is from a legal compendium from 1550, consists of only 4 books. Where is the missing part of the law? Answered Rabbi Yisrael of Rushin, the missing part is the person. Without the living participation of the person, the law is incomplete. Rabbi David Hartman, alav shalom, our teacher, he wrote how the Zionist revolution liberated Jews from a traditional orientation of passivity to historical hope grounded in helpless dependency on the Lord of history. But he also rejected seeing Israel as a sign of the imminent unfolding of some religious eschatology that ultimately gives license to ultra-nationalist violence. Zionism, he wrote, was supposed to move Judaism from the 4 cubits of halakha and to make the Jewish people more responsible, but not more entitled. For Hartman, Zionism began from a sober and in fact terrifying conclusion that God is not coming to save us anymore, that we are responsible, really. It was grounded in humble but hopeful optimism that human beings contain within us the capacity not only to save ourselves, but that with our lives we can and in fact do write the next chapters of the Torah itself. Deuteronomy is about the end of adolescence and the beginning of adulthood. It's about stepping forward and reckoning with our terrible capacity to muck up the world and drive God's presence away. But also the potential within us, the divine potential within us to heal and to repair and to make a place for God to dwell in the world. There is so much pain right now. And as my teacher, totally unscripted, told us, we are not allowed to despair. We're not allowed. At this moment in Jewish history, I invite each of us to ask ourselves two questions. Number one, to turn inward and ask, how am I? Not them. How am I responsible for driving God's presence from the world? And number two, what is the chapter that I and only I can write in God's Torah? Shabbat Shalom.